Hello and welcome to this pattern recognition video for beginners. So if you're a beginner chess player, what do you do? How do you start? There's so much information out there on chess. How do you begin to improve your game, if you're just learning? Well, tactics play a very important part when you're starting out. Most chess games are probably lost by a tactical oversight when it comes to beginners playing. So, one way to improve your tactical vision, abilities, is to just solve puzzles regularly. And that's where pattern recognition comes in. So, what you can do is solve a set of puzzles. I'll try and do at least 10 puzzles here today. And you want to solve the puzzles that you choose, whether it's 5 or 10 or 100 or more. You want to solve them more than once, because if you just solve them once, you might completely forget about them and forget the tactic or the pattern that you see in that puzzle. But if you go through nice and slow the first time solving the puzzle, and then you go through the problems again and try and solve them faster and faster each time, up to 7 times, by the time you go through those puzzles the 7th time, you'll probably almost have them memorized, and that will help you to remember a lot more of the tactics and patterns and hopefully see them in your own games. All right, so let's begin here. What you want to do when you're trying to decide on a move, especially if you're a beginner, you want to ask yourself, well, what did the move that my opponent just made, what did that accomplish? Why did he make that move? He dropped the bishop back here to e7. Is there any reason for that? Well, I don't know. Maybe it prevents this knight from coming forward. Is there any kind of threat to your king? You always want to look for checks, captures, and threats. Not only checks, captures, and threats that you can make, but ones that your opponent can make against you. And checks first, because those are the most forcing. So that'll help you find the answer in this puzzle. So you look at what move was just played. Is there any threat to us with that move? It looked like it was, I don't know, a defensive move, dropping back near the king. So now we can look at the material to see if we're ahead or behind in material. We have 5 pawns. Our opponent has 5 pawns. We have 2 minor pieces, so does our opponent. We have a rook, but we're behind by an entire queen. So that means we can't just trade down material evenly. We need to go for an attack on the king, most likely. So we want to look at checks first. The only move that we have that delivers a check, and hopefully you found it, pause the video at any time if you need to think longer. It looks like we could just go here, delivering a check. And especially if you're a beginner, you want to try and calculate a couple moves out if you can. Think about, once you go here delivering that check, what might your opponent do? And you don't want to check just because you can. You want to make sure there's a good follow-up move or a couple moves after that check. So we deliver the check, and when a king is in check, there are 3 or less options. Capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run from the attacker. So if we go here and we deliver that check, the king can't capture our rook here. He can't, well, he could block, so that's one option, but the king can't run anywhere because he's under check. So we're going to go there, check. The only move possible is to block with the bishop, and then we just capture that bishop with check. And now the king is forced to go to the only square possible, here, and then we can deliver a checkmate with rook to e8. So here's what it looks like. Check, check, and mate, because we have the bishop backing up our rook, and this is where the pattern recognition comes in. In this checkmate pattern, we have the rook on one of the side squares around the king. here, 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 or here. One of those four side squares. So the rook is on one of those. Make sure it's protected like it is by the bishop. And the rook covers squares around the king in a T formation. So the square that it's on is part of this T, and it covers these two squares. So that leaves here, 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 and here as the only squares not covered by the rook. And the pawn is helping with that, as is the bishop. So here we notice also three pieces, including this pawn. So rook, bishop, and pawn all working together to checkmate. And on average, it takes about 3 pieces to checkmate the opposing king, but that of course depends on how many defenders there are. All right, on to puzzle number 2. What was that? A capture? Did that knight just capture something? So the move you would think you should make is probably to just recapture that knight. But before you do that, you want to see if there's any better moves, starting with checks, then captures, then threats. Okay. What do we have here? Well, checks. Checks first is the most forcing. We could just go here, dropping the knight back and delivering a check. And the king would be forced to what? Move into the corner because our queen is preventing that king from coming forward. But do we have a good follow-up? Well, maybe we do. We can deliver the check. Then the king is forced into the corner. We can check again with the queen. And what can he do? Block with a rook, then we just capture the rook. Can't capture the queen. He can run back to where he was. No, he can't even do that because our knight is covering that. So check, check. He has to block. Checkmate. All right, so interesting little pattern there, and often the queen and the knight work well together because they move differently from one another. The queen can go in any direction, in a straight line, but the knight moves in an L shape, which the queen can't do. So they complement one another well. All right, on to puzzle number 3. We just have a pawn pushing forward, attacking our bishop. So what is that move accomplishing? Well, it's threatening to take our bishop. Although it almost looks like, they couldn't capture with the other pawn because we have a mate threat here. All right, what can we do here? We should look at material. We have 7 pawns. Our opponent has 7 as well. We each have queen, 2 rooks, and 4 minor pieces. So we're looking to respond maybe to this attack on our bishop. Now, how do you respond? You can just retreat to safety, or you can look for a counter threat that's more powerful. And that's where you really want to look at checks first, as they are most forcing. All right, what checks do we have that are any good? We could maybe move our queen here, delivering a check. Then remember, 3 options when the king is in check. Capture the attacker, block the attacker, or run. And if none of them can be accomplished, then it's a mate. But here, if they block with the pawn, we can just take that pawn. So check, the king will most likely run. He could go forward or here, and both of those lead to a mate. So check. He's going to block here, and that just delays the inevitable. And then a mate because of this bishop here. All right, on to puzzle number 4. The knight is stepped forward, delivering a check. So we have to deal with that, but how do we do that? Well, when you're in check, what are the three options? Capture, block, or run. Now we can't capture because the rook is pinning us. So, if we look at material, we have what? 6 pawns versus 5. We're ahead by 1 pawn. And we do have the bishop, which a bishop is a little stronger when there's pawns on both sides because it can zip across the board much faster. And also here, this could have been a bad move. By bringing that knight here, it's under attack by the bishop. So, we could go after the rook, and then we have a threat on 2 pieces. That's a double attack. We just have to ask ourselves, what can our opponent do, if we go after that rook? I think this is the best move. We target the rook, and then the bishop is no longer pinned, and it's targeting the knight. So there we go, and we grab that. But now there's a fork here, so that was a little bit tricky. Now they're forking the king and the bishop, so we need to do something about that. Where is best to move, left or right with our king? No, the best thing to do, remember, you have options. Capture, block, or run. Just because you're in check doesn't mean you automatically have to run. Maybe you can block, so we can save our bishop by blocking here. And now we're just up that extra bishop. All right, on to puzzle number 5. The queen has just captured a pawn here. What do we do? Oh, and the rook is under attack. And they have this dangerous passed pawn 1 square away from promotion. So probably we need to get rid of that. An obvious move is to just go ahead and capture. So maybe something like that. But you always want to look at those checks, captures, and threats. So maybe we go here, delivering a check. The only thing that can be done is for the king to move. And now what do we do? Do we have a follow-up? Remember, you don't want to check just because you can. You want to make sure that you have a good follow-up move. Also, do we go here, targeting that rook? The rook could just move, and then we could pick this off. So this one's a little bit trickier. We have 4 pawns. Our opponent has 4 pawns, but like I said, this dangerous pawn is very close to promotion. Our rook is under attack. If we take, he could take, we take, and then he grabs this, and he has this dangerous passed pawn over here. Although, no, we can go ahead and take that. So maybe that's the thing to do. Trade down, and we have that extra 1 pawn at the end. We go there. He takes. We take. Oh, and we can't grab that because now our queen's on a different square. So now we'll be here, and we won't be able to go after that. So, what else can we do? If we go there, he just goes there. So maybe, we go there with the counter threat. If he goes here, we take with check. The king has to come forward. Well, then what do we do? I mean, we could go there, but then the queen can move out of the way and promote his pawn on the next move, so that's not looking so good. So maybe we need to go with that check. If we deliver the check, then what? The king just goes here, and I don't see a good follow-up there. So I don't know. Maybe we have to go there. What am I missing here? We go there. If he takes... Oh, he can't take because then we have that mate in 1 there. So I think we can just snatch that up. And then we're targeting that. So we just grab that. Because now he can't take, or like I said, there's a mate right here. So, you know, if he goes here, well then we take this rook. So that's not looking too good for our opponent. All right, I'll try and do 5 more puzzles real quick here. That way we get an even 10 in. What is our opponent doing? Well, he pushed the pawn forward. Our bishop is kind of trapped, except it could go all the way up to here or even here and capture the knight. What else do we have? Oh, okay. Now, this is very important. When you're trying to figure out what moves to make, you always want to look for checks, captures, and threats. Checks first as they're most forcing. Now, what are all the ways we can check here? Well, of course we could go there, but the king could just take our bishop. What else can check? Well, hopefully you found that this knight can go here or here and deliver a check. Now, which one of those is better? If we go here, we could be captured. But if we go here, we cannot be captured because there'll be a pin, and that'll be a mate. So hopefully you found that move, delivering a checkmate. All right, on to puzzle number 7. We just had a capture. What did that achieve? Well, I think it took a pawn. But if we look at checks, captures, and threats, we do have a check. The only thing the king can do, can't capture or run. He would have to block. But then we could go here maybe and threaten a mate on the next move. So check, block. If we go here, then we're threatening mate on the next move, and I don't think that can be stopped. So check, go here, and now it's a mate. All right, hopefully you found that one. On to puzzle number 8. What is this? What did this move accomplish? Well, it guards the back rank. You know, it prevents us from going here or here. You know, and then they would have to block, and then we could take with a checkmate. So, how do we take advantage of this? All right. Well, we want to look at all the checks. I mean, if we go here with our queen, we'll be captured. We could go there with the rook. And if we go there with the rook and they capture this way, well then, remember, we have this bishop all the way in the corner that can deliver a check. So I think that works. Although, let me double check that. If we go there, the queen could capture. And then what do we do? So maybe we need to add more pressure by capturing this pawn first and threatening a mate in 1 here. So if we go there, we're threatening a mate in 1 with the bishop and the queen. So our opponent would have to defend against that. And how would he do that? Maybe move here. But then we could pin the queen to the king. So, you know, interesting little tactical pattern there. Now we can just go here and win the queen. And we also deliver a mate. So hopefully you found that. And if you're a complete beginner, just starting in chess and these seem difficult for you, the more you solve these puzzles, they'll get easier as you do them more often and start recognizing the patterns and the tactics. All right, puzzle number 9. The king has just stepped closer to the action here with this pawn. What direction is this pawn trying to go? That way. So the question is, if we just ignore, right now the pawn's protecting our knight. What if we ignore that and we just go there and he takes the knight, and then we go here and he moves up to guard the promotion square, and then we go there. Does that work? So if we go there, he doesn't have to take that knight, but maybe that's the best move. So that's what I'm going to go with. We push there, and we just keep pushing forward to try and promote. So there we go. And with that extra queen, we should be winning. All right, on to the final puzzle, number 10. The pawn is just pushed forward, and what do we do about that? It's starting to get very dangerous trying to promote there. We do have 4 pawns versus 2, but they have this dangerous passed pawn. We could try and maybe get ready to move in front of it, but maybe we have something better and we should look at checks, captures, and threats. So, checks first. Now, as I mentioned, we're ahead, 4 pawns to 2. So when you're ahead in material, you want to try and trade off pieces and then use your extra pawns to win in the end game. So maybe we just go here, forking the king and the queen, forcing the capture. Then we capture. The king will start coming forward, but we still have time to move here, take the pawn, and then run our other pawn up. So check. There we go. We can stop that pawn, and we should be winning, especially with this passed pawn of our own over here. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed these 10 puzzles. Remember, if you're trying to improve, especially if you're a beginner, study tactics. Learn by reading, watching videos, solve puzzles. Tactics, and more tactics will help you improve when you're a beginner. And also try to play chess regularly. Play a game a day or more and try and learn from your mistakes as you're playing. All right, feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy hearing what viewers have to say. If you have a request for anything in the future, put in a request for a video and I'll try and do that. Also, like and subscribe to support the channel if you haven't already. Thank you for watching and have a super chess day.